All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. It should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you are on a larger screen. All right, so let's see if we got some questions in here. Um, so like question here. First question is from James S. Says, why are hybrids easier to hit with irons? I think it means than irons. So they're easier to hit because they're easier to get up in the air because of the weight distribution. So with a hybrid, you can kind of get the weight more below on the lower side of the club, and that allows the ball to get lifted up out of the air a little bit more. And then also um, because of the construction of the club head, they can get a little bit more pop out of the club head. So that's generally why they're easier to hit, is because they're easier to get up in the air. So if you struggle to get those long irons up in the air, you struggle to get a 3, 4, 5 iron up in the air, it could be a good time to consider maybe replacing those with 3, 4, 5 hybrids that can help you to get the ball up in the air a little bit more. The only way to really know that for sure is to go get professionally fitted. So I do recommend that you do that. But yeah, that's because of how it's constructed. It makes it easier to get the ball up in the air. So John B says, ways to slow down the backswing and transition. I have a habit of getting very quick on the backswing, which feels like it leads to starting the hands on the downswing early. A very bad habit, but also seems very tough to stop and slow down. What I would recommend doing is focusing on making a full turn, right? If you focus on making a full turn, you'll take a much more deliberate backswing. And it's okay to have a quick backswing. What we don't want to have is a short backswing, right? The backswings that we see that are kind of like this, where you bring it back fast and through, right? And that's exaggerated. But if you focus on, okay, I want to make sure that I'm getting a nice full shoulder turn. One feeling that I like to have is I like to feel like at the top of the swing that I'm looking at the ball over my lead shoulder, right? So I go to the top, at the top of the swing. Now you can see I'm looking at the ball over my lead shoulder, and then I can start my downswing from there. If you're taking a really short backswing, you're probably not getting to the point to where you're able to look at the ball over your lead shoulder. So focus on making a good full turn, and those kind of short, quick swings will happen much less often. All right, so John C says, hi Q, I watched the ball position video that you recently put out. If I move the ball back in my stance, shouldn't I open my alignment slightly? Not necessarily. You don't necessarily need to. My question would be is why? Why do you say that? Why do you say that you have to open up your alignment because you're putting the ball back in your stance? Because you feel like you're going to swing too much from the inside. Is that what you're saying? So if I put the ball here, I swing too much from the inside. So, I mean, you can, but you can also just swing less from the inside, right? So, when I put the ball back in my stance, the only reason I would change my alignment will be to make it easier for me to swing the club in a different direction, right? But you don't have to do that, right? I can set up open, right, and still swing away from the inside. I can set up closed and still swing over the top, right? So there's nothing about our body alignments that force us to swing a certain way. It's about making it easier to swing a different way, right? So if I put the ball more back in my stance, it's much easier to attack that ball from the inside. That might be a reason why I put it back in my stance, right? So you have to look at, again, it's the premise of the video is that the shot dictates the ball position, not the club, right? The shot does. So it really just depends on the kind of shot that I'm trying to hit. Let's say I'm trying to hit like a low stinger, right? A low stinger, right? And if I'm trying to hit this low stinger, I'm generally going to try to hit it more with a little bit of a draw or maybe even like a little bit of a sweeping hook, not too much, but because if you hook the ball too much, you can lose some distance. So I don't want to overhook the ball, and it also can be a little bit more difficult to control. So in that situation, I might open up my stance a little bit to make it to where I'm not swinging so much from the inside. But it really just depends on the kind of shot that you're trying to hit. So you don't have to, right? But if you're trying to hit it straighter and it makes it easier for you to not swing so far from the inside, then you can adjust your stance a little bit. So Brett W says, what causes a push to the right, not a slice, but a push? So a push to the right is typically two things that can cause this, or it can be a combination of these two things. The first would be if you're hitting the ball solidly. So if you're actually hitting the ball in the center of the face and hitting it solidly, this is what causes a push. All right. There is one other thing that can cause a push if you're hitting it solidly, and we'll talk about that. So generally, if you're hitting a push, what's happening is your club is working from in to out relative to the target line, and then your club face is in that same direction. So if you want to put numbers on it, degrees, let's say, I could say that my club is working 8 degrees to the right, and then my club face at impact is also pointed 8 degrees to the right. If I hit the ball in the middle of the face, that's going to produce a shot that starts to the right and doesn't have any curvature. It's just a push to the right. Right. So to counteract that, you would really just want to feel like you're swinging more to the left. Right. So feel like you're swinging left of the target line. I know that's over the top, but this is a feel. It's not going to be the reality. If you actually do it, you can always tone it down, but that would be a feel. Golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So if I'm swinging too much from the inside and it feels like I'm swinging, perfectly on plane or whatever, right? Then I may feel like I'm coming over the top to get myself on plane, right? So that's what causes a push out to the right. Another thing that can cause a push out to the right would be alignment, right? So if I actually feel like I'm lined up at the target, but then I'm actually aligned up to the right, I could be swinging, perfectly on plane relative to my feet, right? But the relative to the target line, it's still the same reason. I'm still swinging too much to the right, but what can make you do that is being too far aligned to the right. So that can happen a little bit as well. The other thing that can cause the ball to kind of push out to the right would be a toe strike, right? So if I hit the ball off the toe, the face is going to twist, right? It will twist open and the ball will start to the right. Now, depending on the club face orientation at impact, it may not be a straight push to the right, but it can be, right? Because when you hit the ball off the toe, something called gear effect happens as well, where the ball will tend to draw more or fade less than it normally would. So let's say that I hit a ball and I hit the ball off the toe, and it would have normally kind of been a slice to the right. Well, because I hit it off the toe, it starts more to the right. And then because I put a slice swing on it, it kind of straightens it out, right? So that toe strike, that gear effect can make it kind of go straight when it would have normally been a slice. So like I said, toe strikes are going to make the ball start more to the right than it normally would, then tend to draw more or fade less than it normally would. Doesn't mean it's going to necessarily draw. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to start to the right. I can I can have my club face really, really close at impact and hit it off the toe, and it can still start to the left, right? It's just going to start more to the right than it normally would have had I hit it in the middle of the face. So those are the things that I would look at. So if you're hitting it solidly, it's just because your path is to the right. I would check your alignment and make sure. Easy way to check your alignment: put the alignment stick on the ground, get your feet lined up. Get that alignment stick lined up with the target out in the distance. Get your feet lined up with it and see kind of where you're hitting it. Right. You could be hitting it dead straight, and then when you're out on the course, you may realize, okay, well, I'm too closed off, right, and that's what's causing my pushes to the right. So those would be the things that I'd be looking at. Now, if you're not hitting it solidly, probably hitting it off the toe, right? Use the foot power spray it on the club face, see where you're striking it on the face, and then just like on the other side of it, if I'm coming too much from the inside, I may want to feel like I'm coming over the top to get myself closer to more of a neutral path down to the ball. If you're someone who's hitting it off the toe, what I would do is I would change your intention to hitting it off the heel, right? Because that will move the strike more to the center of the face. All right, keep the questions coming. We got lots of time left here. So while you guys are coming up with questions, I'm actually going to take a quick restroom break. I was busy up to office hours here and didn't have a chance. So I will be right back. All right, so Reg N says, what do you think of focusing on keeping a Y with your arms and club through both the backswing and the downswing as a method of keeping the ball strike more consistent? Not familiar with that. Keeping a Y with your arms. So you mean like the club in the arm structure makes a Y? I don't think that would be very powerful, right? So if I were to kind of keep this arm structure, right, I need to be able to fold up my arm as I get up to the top, right? I need to be able to fold up my trail arm. If I were to keep that structure, that's not going to be very powerful. That's as much as I can do. Now, I think with short chips and things like that, I think that can be. I actually do think that that's a great way to stay more consistent. I don't like to see if we're taking kind of a a shorter chip where we're kind of going hands waist level to waist level. I think it would be great to kind of keep that structure. But for a full swing, that is what you're talking about, right? Yeah. So it sounds like you're talking about full swing. It's just not going to be very powerful. If I keep that structure, that's really, if I cock my wrist, that's as much as I can bring the club up, right? And maybe you can be more consistent in doing that. And when we say more consistent, you might be able to possibly. Now, it's not something I've tried before, but it's possible that you could, because with a short swing, I just feel like if you're trying to make a full swing and you're trying to get some good distance, you're probably going to try to get some speed, and you're probably going to end up swinging like really trying to swing really really quick and really hard, and it's going to make you lose kind of feel for things. So I think for a full swing, in my opinion, it's probably not going to be something that's going to allow you to be more consistent, because your brain is telling you need, like, if you're trying to hit a driver off the tee and you're trying to get that ball out there, within reason, as far as you can get out there as you can, right? That you're going to try to find a way to get speed, right? And the way you're probably going to do that, if you're trying to keep your arms kind of like dead, basically you basically have to keep your arms pretty straight to make that happen. Now the lead arm, right? We want to keep that relatively straight. It can definitely have some bend in it. I think some people tend to overthink trying to keep that lead arm dead straight. It can definitely bend. There's elite golfers that have bend in their lead arm. But that trail arm, if we try to keep that relatively straight, right, it's just, I'm not going to be able to get the club back there very far. And also, there are 0 tour players that do this that I know of. I mean, I've never seen any elite golfers do this, keep that trail arm straight. Every elite golfer that I've ever seen gets the folds up that right arm, that trail arm, because that allows you to get the club to travel farther in great speed. And the other thing to think about is, what we have to understand, what a lot of people may not realize, is that the number one correlation to lower handicap, right? So when we're looking at what do players with lower handicaps have that players with higher handicaps don't have, speed. It's the number one correlation, right? And it makes sense, because if you have more club head speed, you will hit the ball farther. And if you hit the ball farther, it's much easier to play golf, right? Because longer drives lead to shorter approaches. Shorter approaches lead to closer proximity to the hole on your approach shots. And closer proximity to the hole leads to more, easy pars, occasional birdies, that sort of thing, right? So I would be, you kind of have to find that happy mix. I wouldn't be in the boat of, I don't know how many yards I could get. Like if I hit a drive where I kept my arm straight, right, and kept that Y, and you're saying keep that Y structure, right? So that means I can't even hinge the club up, right? Because that's not a Y, right? This is a Y. So I would have to swing the club like that, right? I don't know if I could hit a driver much more than 150 yards doing that, right? So I'm almost cutting my distance in half, right? I generally I'm 280-ish, 290, 300 on it. If I'm really feeling good that day, I might be able to get 300 off the tee, right? My club head speed's in the 110 to 115 range, right? When I'm feeling good, I'm 115. That's about 300 yards. When I'm a little bit tighter, I'm more in the 110 range. That's, a solid drive is going to be, 280-ish in that situation, 275. So I just don't think I could hit a ball very far doing that. And if I'm hitting my driver 150 yards off the tee, it's going to be very, very difficult for me to get to the green in 2. So very, very difficult. Maybe the Y could be more feel than real. Yeah, maybe. I mean, if you're someone who really folds up your arms, right, who doesn't turn and kind of folds up your arms like this, then the feel of keeping, of keeping your trail arm a little bit straighter and your lead arm a little bit straighter, that feel can be good. But if you're literally doing that's going to be very detrimental. Great, can be great for chipping. I mean, I would say it's not really something I think about when I'm chipping, but I'm just thinking about the video. I videoed myself chipping, and I don't really break down my arms very much. So, I let the club load a little bit, because I feel like if you don't let the club load a little bit, you're going to tend to kind of throw it. So I like to let the club load a little bit. And when I say load, I mean kind of lag, right? I let it lag a little bit, so that way when I'm coming through, I'm not scooping it. I'm able to kind of turn through with my body. So I let the momentum of the club kind of load it a little bit, and then I turn through. And that's really what you see in a lot of the best players. So I think that would work well for short shots, but not, and help you to be very consistent, because there's just no need to really break down the arm. We want to fold up the arm so that way we can create more space. But yeah, if you're someone who's overdoing that, you're really folding up the arm, you're getting up to the top, and you're kind of like this, maybe the feeling of the Y thing gets you in this position. It's what I said earlier. Golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. If you want to change your swing, a big mistake that a lot of people make is they just try to feel what exactly they're trying to do, right? So, for example, let's say you are somebody that goes up to the top and you break down your lead arm a ton and your trail arm. So basically, you're at the top like this, right? This is not going to be a very powerful position. So you're not turning and you're really kind of breaking down your arms to create length in the swing. So if you just try, if that golfer who's been doing that forever, right, been doing that for 10 years, right, tries to get into a position like this at the top, more than likely it's going to look very similar to what they're already doing because it's not exact. It's too close to what they're already doing. So that feeling of the why may help them to actually get into that position, right? It's like how the 20-minute shallowing fix works, right? In the 20-minute shallowing fix, we get you to get the club face really close so that way you hook it, right? And then we get you to shallow out the club so much that the ball starts to the right and hooks, right? So we get you to over close the face, we get you to over shallow out the club, and then the last drill, you tone it down to get it dialed in, right? That's the fastest way to change anything. If you are someone who's coming over the top and steep, all right, over the top steep, and you have an open club face, and you just try to get it into if you just try to shallow it the perfect amount, more than likely you're still going to be coming over the top and steep. You're just going to be coming down maybe a little bit less, if that. A lot of times people just do the exact same thing. You know why? Because you're already trying to do that, and if you were able to do it, you would be doing it already, right? So if you want to change your swing, you got to exaggerate the opposite, even though that wouldn't be the thing that you would necessarily want to do, right? Literally. But a lot of times when we exaggerate things, we actually either move closer to the thing that we're trying to do, or we actually get to the thing that we want to do. And the other thing I would say is the mindset you should have is, if you actually overdo it literally, then it's so easy just to tone it down. All you'd have to do is just tone that down. So that's how the 20-minute shallowing fix works. That's why it's so effective. That's why you can go from coming over the top and steep with an open face to shallowing out the club and hitting nice draws. You can do that in a range session, right? Not everyone. Now, some people, it's the over the top and open face is so ingrained, and it's it's very difficult to feel that closing of the face because it's so foreign to what you're doing, and maybe what you've been doing is you've been doing that for a long time, right? It's not always that easy for everybody, but for a lot of people, it's you can get to where you're shallowing out the club nicely in a range session because if you commit to it and you let it go, you can make it happen. So yeah, I think it could be a good feel depending on what the problem is in your swing. Also, a good feel for putting, maintaining the lie. I think that's probably the best. That's probably the best thing that it's a feel for is putting. A little bit in chipping, and putting, like a literal feel. All right. Keep the questions coming. We got 30 minutes or so left here. Right. How do you start the downswing? So the easiest way to think about starting the downswing is we want to start it from the ground up, right? So what that means is that I want to get pressure into the ground with my lead foot. That's what I want to facilitate my downswing. That's what I want to start, right? So I'm moving into my lead side as I'm getting up to the top, right? I'm going to get that pressure into the ground. I'm going to start pushing into the ground. That's going to get my legs going. That's going to get my hips going. That's going to get my chest going. That gets my arms going. And then my arms get the club going, right? And then my wrists kind of throw the club into the ball. That's the sequence that I want. What I don't want to do is imagine if I did the opposite, right? So I'm at the top, right? I'm on my trail foot. And then I throw, with the club first. I push my arms down. Then it's not, you can imagine how I'm not going to have anything left by the time I get to the ball because I've thrown out everything early. So what I want to do is I want to get that pressure into the ground, and then that's what kind of facilitates everything. So how do we get that pressure into the ground first? Well, we have to be moving that pressure toward our lead foot as we're getting up to the top of the swing. That's probably the thing that most people struggle with when they start their downswing, or they're confused about how to start the downswing, is because when they get up to the top of the swing, most of their weight is on their trail foot, right? So they're at the top of the swing. Well, I can't, if I'm at the top of the swing and almost all my weight is on my trail side, I'm going to have a hard time starting down with my lower body. I'm going to have to kind of start down with my upper body, right? So what we want to understand is that we're going to shift our weight to our trail side to start the backswing, right? Right away to start the backswing. That's another mistake that people make, is that they shift the weight too late to their trail side. They're waiting till they get to the top of the swing. We want to do that right away. Get that weight moving to the trail. I want to feel pressure increasing in my trail foot right away, right as I start bringing the club back, or even some players it's before. That's what for some people, that's what, starts the backswing, is pressure into the trail foot, and then we throw the club back, right? So pressure trail foot, I'm throwing the club back about halfway back or so, right? So my hands are above my waist, below my chest, right in this area here. This is when you are done with your weight shift to your trail side. That's as much weight as you're going to have on your trail side. From here to the top of the swing, I'm actually going to start moving pressure into my lead side. I'm going to start moving in that direction. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to have all my pressure on my lead foot at the top of the swing. It just means I'm moving it in that direction. So if you think about it this way, at address, let's say I'm about 50-50 equal pressure in my feet here. When I start my backswing, right away, that pressure is increasing in my trail foot. So by the time I get in this area where I'm maxing out the pressure in my trail foot, I'm maxing out my weight shift, I have about 75-80% pressure on my trail side, right? Now, as I get up to the top of the swing, it's going to gradually, ever so gradually, kind of move into my lead side. And at the top of the swing, I'm going to be about 50-50, right? So it's moving in that direction, but I don't have it all in that direction. I think that's where a lot of people get confused with this, because there's a lot of videos about, we need to be moving into our lead side, in the last part of the backswing. But not everything's moving into the lead side, right? We're just moving it in that direction. So that way, when we start the downswing, it can continue to move in that direction. You can start the downswing from the ground up, right? So 50-50, 75-80% in the trail foot. I'm about 50-50 again. And then when I start my downswing, I'm going to keep increasing that pressure into my lead foot. So a great way to kind of get this feeling is with the step drill. So with the step drill, you start with your feet close together. You're going to push down with your trail foot. As soon as you push down with the trail foot, you can throw the club back, right? So what's really important with understanding how to do the step drill, what we have to understand is that the pressure that we put into the ground has to precede the motion of the club. So for my club to go that way, I have to apply a pressure in my feet in front of that, right? So I'm going to apply pressure in my trail foot so I can throw the club that way. And then in order for me to change directions with the club and throw the club that way, I have to have pressure in my lead foot to start my downswing, right? So pressure, throw, and then as I throw this back, I'm going to be stepping forward. That's me getting my momentum and moving my pressure into my lead foot as I'm getting up to the top. I'm going to land on that lead foot, and then I'm going to start my downswing. And then I'm going to come around into a full finish. So a good progression that you can do is you can start, this is a no golf ball drill when you're doing the step drill. It's just to get the timing and sequencing of the weight shift down. I'm going to shift, throw, pressure, throw, pressure. I'm going to land, pressure, throw, come around to a full finish. Once I get the timing of that down and I'm feeling comfortable with that, and I'm at a pretty good speed with it, you may need to start out slow at first, but once you get to a good speed with it, then what I would do is I would do a normal stance, so no step, but I'm going to replicate that same pressure and timing. So I'm going to pressure, trail foot. I'm going to throw it back. As I throw it back, I'm moving pressure into my lead foot. I'm going to start my downswing, come around to a full finish, right? Need to start out slow with that, then build up the speed, get comfortable with that. And again, this is no golf ball. And then from there, what I would do is I would put a tee on the ground and I would just practice clipping the tee, right? So you're coming down, you're clipping the tee. If you're on a mat, what you can do is you can brush the mat, but try to make the mat make the same sound, right? So it's not a just really barely grazing it. on one and then really slamming into it the next. I want you to feel like you're getting the same kind of brushing sound, the same amount of brushing on every single one of them. And I try to make that be in the same spot. And then once you get to that, then I would add the golf ball and do it with the golf ball. That's the progression that I would take you through to get the downswing starting from the ground up. All right, see if there's any new questions in here. Oh, no new questions. So like I said, we got not quite 30 minutes left. We're on a Friday here. So I will stay on here till noon. In the meantime, I'll just be working on some of my other stuff. All right. So, what is the cure for golfer's elbow? So, first and foremost, I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you that kind of cure. I'm going to give you kind of the instructor's cure. So, what we have to understand is that what creates that golfer's elbow? Typically, golfer's elbow is on the inside of the elbow on the trail arm. And the way you can kind of remember this, the difference between tennis elbow and golf elbow. Tennis elbow is typically more on this side of your arm. That side of your arm's typically more fuzzy, like tennis balls. So that's the tennis side. And then on the inside, that's typically where the golfer's elbow happens. This part is more bare, like there's no golf balls aren't fuzzy. So that'd be more resembling a golf ball. So basically, golfer's elbow, from my understanding, comes from just overworking of the muscle, right? Kind of like a tendonitis kind of thing. It's overworking it. So if you imagine, if you put your hand where it hurts, right, and then you make the motions of your wrist, see when it's tight, right? So when I go like that, that's when this tightens up, right? So that's me flexing that muscle. Well, look what I'm doing with my wrist, right? So what that means is if I'm getting golfer's elbow, it typically means that I'm excessively doing this, right? Now you can have a perfectly good golf swing, and if you're practicing a ton, right, you're going to have a lot of repetition, right? You can get it. I've gotten it before. I know Clay's gotten it before. It's just something that happens from just a lot of practice, right? A lot of overuse. But if you're someone who's maybe not practicing a ton, but you're still getting that, it may have something to do with what you're doing in your swing that's excessive, right? So look what I'm doing, right? I'm doing this, right? So what is that in the golf swing? If I'm doing that with my wrist, that would be like a big time over release or early release, right? Too much of an early release. So if you're coming into contact and you're really scooping the ball, right? You're not turning through the ball. You're not getting your hands and letting the momentum of the club kind of naturally release it. Then that can lead to getting that kind of golfer's elbow that can cause some pain. So a drill that you can do to maybe help you to work on getting to where you're turning through the ball better. A drill that I like to use is the stick drill. So what you do with the stick drill, you take an alignment stick. I've talked about the stick drill a lot, and really it's just because it is the best drill, right? To help you with this. It's the best drill that I've ever used or found to help with this because it gives you direct and instant feedback on whether you are releasing the club early or not. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this alignment stick, and you can get these at any home improvement store. Don't go to the golf stores and overpay for these fiberglass sticks. Go to your local home improvement store, Lowe's, Menards, Home Depot, any of those. You can get these for like $2. All right. So you take one of these, you put half of it down the shaft, half of it out the butt end of the club. And now if I do that same thing with my wrist that can lead to that golfer's elbow, this thing's going to whack me in the side, right? So it's giving me feedback and letting me know, okay, I need to turn my body through to keep that club kind of lagging behind to allow my body to learn how to rotate through the ball, right? So I would just start out with some shorter, slower swings without a golf ball to get comfortable and understanding how I need to turn through the ball. I would try to make swings where you make this stick not touch you. Now, I've done this a lot, so it's pretty easy for me to bring this club back and turn through. And you can see this comes nowhere near me, right? Now I'm really focusing on really turning my body through. I'm feeling like the only thing that's bringing the club to the ball is the rotation of my body. Because right now, if you have that excessive, with the right wrist that makes that muscle flex in your elbow there, if you have that excessively, you're bringing the club to the ball mostly with your arms and your wrists. And I want you to feel like you're bringing it there with your rotation of your body. So the stick drill, starting out with some shorter and slower swings, and then building that up to longer and faster swings. Start with no golf ball, and then you can eventually add the golf ball as you get more comfortable with it. Now, when you add the golf ball, you may find that it's very difficult, and that's pretty normal. The reason why it may be difficult for you is because the club face is not in a position that's going to allow you to get your hands in front and have the club face square, right? Because a big reason why a lot of people do this motion is to square up the face. If I release the club earlier, right, that squares up the face. If I have this face open and then I turn and I get my hands in front, that face is going to stay open. So what you might do is you might release it to square it up, right? And that might be part of the problem of why you're excessively using your wrist. So what I recommend doing for most golfers to get that club face in a much stronger position is to use a stronger grip. So a stronger grip is where we have our lead hand more on top and our trail hand more under. That in and of itself helps to get the club face more closed, right? So with the stick drill, when you get to the point to where you're hitting balls and maybe you're finding it very difficult to hit those balls, right? And because you feel the need to really have to release it, I would look at your club face orientation. And if that is wide open, and one way you can kind of look at that is if you look at your swing on video. If you look at your swing on video and you pause it when this club is parallel to the ground and you see this club pointing up to the sky in any way, right? That means that your face is open. I want this club face angled down slightly toward the ground. So if you kind of see the difference there, this would be, even this is pointing up to the sky a little bit, right? It's more pointing to the sky than it is toward the ground. I want to have it pointing down just a little bit, right? When you look at most tour players, what you're going to see is that club face pretty closely matches their spine angle, right? So if you're looking from down the line, I'm coming down. There's my club face. You see how my club face is kind of like this. If you look at my back line, it's kind of the same. That's generally what you're going to see in the best players. And that allows them to have that face in an orientation that's going to incentivize them to turn through the shot, get their hands in front. Because if they, from this face orientation, if I got really handsy and really did that with my wrist, well, look what happened. That club face is going to be super close. I'm going to hit everything way to the left. So that may be a difficult thing, to get the club face square if you happen to have that wide open. It's going to be difficult to get the club face square with the hands in front if that club face is wide open. You're going to feel the need to want to get that wrist involved, right? So if you're in that situation, what I'd recommend doing is working through the 20-minute shallowing fix. In drill number 1, Clay addresses getting the club face more closed, and he works you through a sequence, kind of a protocol, if you will, to help you kind of feel a more natural grip that is generally going to be stronger than what you're currently using. For most golfers, it's generally going to be a stronger grip. Most golfers that I see through the online lessons or, in person or whatever at the clinics, most of these golfers that I see have weaker grips. It's very, very common, right? And then the club face is very, very open. So if you work through this protocol that Clay has in drill number 1 of the 20-minute shallowing fix, he walks you through how to more naturally feel that stronger grip. It makes it make more sense to have a stronger grip when you work through that. So I highly recommend that you do that. To check that out, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute shallowing fix, and then you can access drill number 1 from there. All right. Bear with me here. I think I heard another question pop up here. All right, good deal. So Jerry D says, can you discuss in detail the pressure in the lead foot as you shift forward and swing through the full finish? Is that pressure on that foot balanced front, back, left, right throughout the swing, or does pressure in that foot shift from front to back, etc.? Yeah. So when you are moving into your lead side, it's going to be more on the balls of your feet initially, and then as you're coming down and pushing to the ground, it's going to move into the heel. Right. So I'd almost think of it like a pedaling motion. If you're riding a bike, right, you're going like this with the bike, right, with the pedals. Naturally, your feet kind of do that. So it's the same kind of thing in the golf swing. When I shift to my trail side, I'm going to be going into the balls of my feet initially, and then as I get up to the top, I'm going to be pushing into the heel. Then when I shift into my lead side, right, I'm going to be in the balls of my feet initially, and then as I'm pushing into the ground and turning my body, right, I'm going to be pushing into the heel. It's much easier to drive into the heel to push the hip back and around than it is to push in the toes. Because if you're pushing in the toes, generally what's happening, look what I'm doing, right? I'm flexing my calf. It's hard for me to push as much into the ground and push my hip back and around if I'm in my toes. You can be, right, but it's more difficult. And also, if I'm in my toes, my balance tends to want to go more out toward the ball, right? I'm going to tend to want to fall out toward the ball. Whereas if I'm driving in my heel, that's going to kind of push my hips back, and that's going to make it easier for me to kind of stay in my posture. So again, it's generally going to be more balls of my feet moving into the heel. It doesn't mean that you can't be successful driving out of the balls of your feet throughout the entire swing. It's really kind of a to each their own. If you can move properly when you do that, then that's great. But most golfers that I see are going, balls of the feet moving into the heel as they're turning through the shot. More in the heel at impact. All right, we got about 15 minutes or so left here. All right, how does the trail leg work in the golf swing? All right, so let's talk about the trail leg. So at address, our pressure in our feet is going to be fairly even. The pressure from heel to toe is going to be fairly even. I don't want to be too much in my toes, too much in my heels, right? I'm going to have a little bit of flex in my knee, right? Generally, the flex is going to be to where the kneecap, the edge of the kneecap here is right over the balls of my feet. I don't want to be way down here like this because then I'm going to tend to stand up. And I don't want to be kind of locked out like this because then I'm going to have a hard time moving, athletically from here. I want to be in a nice athletic position at address. Now, when I start my backswing, right, I want to move pressure into my trail foot right away, right as I start my backswing. This is a big mistake that a lot of golfers make, is that they don't really shift pressure into their trail side until they're getting up to the top of the swing. If you're doing that, it's going to be very difficult to get to your lead side properly and have a proper sequence of your swing. What we want to have is pressure into that trail foot right away. Some players do it even before the club starts going back, which is great too. But most players do it as the club is going back. We're putting pressure in that trail foot, right? Now, as I'm moving up to the top, what's going to happen, and what we see most golfers do, there is some variety here, but this would be kind of my preference, and what I see a lot of the best players do is they will straighten their trail leg out. Now, it's not going to lock out, right? I'm not going to lock that leg out. I don't want to do that. If you lock the leg out, again, you're going to put yourself in an unathletic position. Typically, when you're doing things athletically, you're not locking out joints or anything like that. You're putting your joints in a position, you're moving your body in a way that makes it easier to move athletically, right? So I'm going to straighten out my trail leg, but I'm still going to have a little bit of flex in it as I get that. I don't want to lock it out, right? If I lock it out, it's going to be very difficult for me to move that leg properly in the start of the downswing, right? So I'm going to gradually kind of straighten out my leg as I go to the top. And what that does is that allows me to push my hip back and around. Now, if you're super flexible, you're really, really flexible in your upper body, especially your spine area and your shoulders, and you're flexible in your hip joint, and you can turn into your joint without straightening out your leg, then by all means, that's totally fine. You can do that. There are golfers that do that, but the overwhelming majority of us, the average Joes and the average gals out there, are not going to be able to get a really good hip turn without straightening out that trail leg. So I generally tell pretty much all recreational golfers to allow that trail leg to straighten as we get to the top. If we try to keep that locked and flexed, it's going to really restrict your backswing, and it's going to restrict the amount of power that you can generate, right? The other thing that's really important with the trail leg is we want to keep it angled in, right? So I'm going to shift in my trail side. It's still going to be angled in. And then as I get up to the top, I'm going to keep that leg angled in. That's going to make it a lot easier for me to move into my lead side and downswing. If I move into my trail side and then I kind of continue kind of sliding in that direction, this would be excessive, right? But you can imagine how it'd be very difficult for me to get to my lead side from this position, right? So I want to shift in that trail side. I want to push my hip back around. I keep that angled in. I want to feel a nice, kind of stretch in my side here as I'm doing that. That's going to allow me to be in a great position at the top to be able to really pounce on this downswing. Now, when I start my downswing, right, what I want to do is I want to add flex to my trail leg, right? So my lead leg is going to flex and move in, right, in the backswing. So as you see that, it's going to flex and move in. When I start my downswing, when I get to kind of that lead arm parallel position in the downswing, I want my trail leg to match the flex of my lead leg. So that's going to look something like this. Straightening it out to get up to the top. And then I start my downswing. So you can see the lead arm parallel. Now I've matched the flex with my trail leg to my lead leg. If you look at it from face on, it's going to look like this. Right? So you can see how I've matched the flex here. Now from here, my trail leg is going to generally become more passive. There are some players that still kind of power with their trail leg and push off with their trail leg, like a Rory McIlroy. But I would say that that's more of an advanced technique. So you can do that and really push off and try to get your hips to really fire through faster. But I would try to get to where you're just getting the leg work right first before you try kind of a more advanced technique like that, right? So once my leg kind of gets to that flexed position, right, most of my pressure is going to be in my lead foot. So now my lead leg is going to be kind of powering everything. My trail leg is going to become more passive, right? So I've gotten to the point where I've matched the flexes, right, in my lead leg and my trail leg. From here, most of my pressure is going to be on that lead leg. This trail leg is going to become more passive as I really drive in that lead leg to kind of turn all the way through. And like I said, when I get around to my full finish, again, my leg's just kind of hanging here. It's more passive as I'm coming through. But like I said, there are advanced techniques where I can get here and I continue to, push off that trail side to really kind of fire my body through a little bit faster. Again, advanced technique, you can work on that once you kind of get that lead leg working correctly. And then you can kind of add the trail leg as kind of an extra boost to help you to turn through the ball. So that's really how the trail leg works in the swing. Not really super complicated. I'm sure there's nothing I told you that was really surprising. Get a little bit of flex in there, pressure, straighten it out as we get to the top, keep it angled in. We're going to add flex to it to start the downswing. From here, it's going to become more passive as we come all the way around into the full finish as we're driving in that lead leg. All right. See if we got any more questions here. All right. Is it possible to swing slower and hit the ball farther? Yeah, it's possible. Now, if your launch conditions are really good, when you're swinging fast, then you're not really going to hit it farther if you swing slower, right? So club head speed is the limiter to distance, right? I need to swing a certain club head speed if I want to hit at a certain distance. But if my launch conditions are really bad, right, or my contact is really bad. So let's say I'm swinging 110 miles an hour, and every time I swing 110 miles an hour, I hit it off the toe or I top it or something like that. You're definitely, if you can slow it down and then hit the ball in the middle of the face, you can certainly hit it farther, right? Because when you hit the ball on the toe, what happens is my club face is going to twist, and then I'm not going to transfer as much energy to the golf ball. When I hit the ball in the middle of the face, that club face is much more stable, and it's going to transfer all that energy or all the possible energy that I can to the golf ball, right? So if I swing slower and I'm able to have better contact or better launch conditions. So let's talk about that. With the driver, we want to have ideally for distance, we want to have high launch, low spin with very little curvature, right? So to get the high launch and low spin, you almost want to feel like you're hitting like a top spin forehand in tennis. I actually have a tennis racket right here. Grab this. So in tennis, right, a good thing to do in tennis is to hit with top spin, right? Because that allows you to hit it higher over the net and then drop it before the baseline, right? And it also allows you to hit it harder, right? Because the ball is going to dive. If you hit it with underspin, right, backspin, the ball will tend to float more, right? So I can hit it with the same speed, but if I hit it with backspin, it may sail past the baseline and go out. But if I hit it with the same speed and I hit it with topspin, it may dive over, and then I can put more pressure on my opponent when I do that. So when I'm hitting a driver, when I'm trying to hit high launch and low spin, in order to hit that kind of shot in tennis, right, I want to brush up on the ball, right? So I want to have my tennis racket. Now I'm not a big tennis guy, so I may be off on some of these techniques exactly, but in order to put topspin on it, right, I need to have my racket or whatever you're using, right? I need that to work up as my paddle or racket is angled more down. So if I make this kind of motion and I'm hitting the ball, right? If my fist is the ball, that's going to promote a topspin kind of effect, right? Now in golf, we don't literally want to put topspin on the ball because if we do, it won't stay in the air. We'll dive into the ground. But if we have this feeling when we're hitting a golf ball, which I'll show you in a second, then it can reduce the amount of backspin, right? And it can also allow me to launch it higher. And what I just talked about, what can get you more distance is high launch and lower spin, right? If I have high launch and a lot of spin, then it won't, or say I have low launch and a lot of spin, it's not going to roll out very well. It's not going to go very far. So if I'm hitting driver, right, I almost want to have the sensation that I'm hitting up on the ball, right? So my club head is working upward as my hands are more in front and I'm de-lofting it. Now, again, I wouldn't literally want to hit a golf ball like this because it's not going to get up in there. There's not a lot of loft on a driver. So if I de-loft it too much, I'm just going to hit it straight into the ground. But most golfers that I see are tending to hit their driver more like this, right? Where they're adding a ton of loft by early releasing the club, right? And maybe they're kind of sliding forward as well and kind of hitting down on it. And what we want to do is we want to stay behind the ball, shift into our lead side, stay behind the ball, be more angled away as we're coming in. So that way I can hit up on it. But then I want to be releasing this club out in front. When we talk about the release, we're talking about where the club is splitting my forearms. I want to release this club out in front. So that way at impact, I can have, with a driver, you're going to have either no shaft lean or a little bit of shaft lean, right? If you're coming into contact and you have the shaft leaning backwards, you're adding a lot of loft, and that's going to take away your distance, right? So I want to have little to no shaft lean at impact, and I want to be kind of brushing up on the ball. That's going to allow you to have a high launch, low spin, and I can swing the club at, let's say I swing the club at 110 miles an hour, and I hit it like this, where where maybe I'm chopping down on the ball, or maybe I'm flipping it or whatever. I don't have good launch conditions. And then let's say I swing at 100 miles an hour, but I'm coming in with hitting up on it and getting that high launch, low spin kind of shot. Well, if I'm doing that, I can get more distance if I'm doing that, right? So that's how you can swing slower. The other thing is no curvature, right? If I'm putting a big, huge slice on the ball, if I'm swinging 100 miles an hour and I'm putting a huge slice on the ball, but then when I swing 95 miles an hour, I shallow out the club and I square up the face at impact, you're going to more than likely have much more distance on the one that's 95, because putting that big curve on it, right, is going to make you lose distance, especially if there's wind. If you're hitting into the wind, or if you're hitting with like a crosswind that's really going to make it slice even more, you're going to lose a ton of distance doing that. So that's really what it comes down to. There's no special trick. It's about, if my launch conditions are really good when I'm swinging 110 miles an hour, right? If I just swing slower and have the same exact launch conditions, well, the ball's not going to go any farther. But if I can swing slower and improve my launch conditions, then it can help me to hit the ball farther. So you kind of have to find the happy medium of what works best for you. This is why in the 20-minute distance fix, Clay talks about the difference between like your speed training speed, right? So that's the speed where you're swinging with 100% effort. You're just trying to get the club head to have as much speed as possible. And then your playing speed. Your playing speed is the speed where you get the launch conditions good, right? You hit the ball in the center of the face. You're able to hit up on it with a little, and get the high launch and low spin. You're able to come in and shallow out the club and, square up the face. That's the playing speed that you want to be at. And as your 100% effort, all you got, speed goes up, working through the 20-minute distance fix, your playing speed is going to go up as well. All right. So if you're looking to gain more distance, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at, trying to swing slower, right? What I'd be trying to do is I'd be trying to train yourself to swing faster, but have good launch conditions, so that way you can also get the ball to go farther as well. So if you're interested in gaining more distance, I highly recommend checking out our 20-minute distance fix course. To get to that course, all you have to do is click the instruction tab and then click the 20-minute distance fix course from there. All right. Well, I think that's everybody. Yep. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. We don't have any more questions in there. So it's 1 minute till right now. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. We'll be back here not tomorrow. We'll not be here tomorrow. Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Mondays. Quick note about next week. We will not have office hours next Friday. So if you're a regular Friday attendee of the office hours, just make a note that we will not have office hours next Friday. We're having a distance clinic next Friday, and I won't be able to do both. I can't be in two places at the same time. So, but we'll be back the following Monday, normal schedule the week after that. So everybody have a great weekend, and I will talk to y'all next time.